Hi everyone, delonewolf here. Welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And a bit of news while we walk towards the couch. What I like is that the in-game events seem to be taking shape. Basically, we know that there is this Kyonoke virus or disease that is spreading around, causing havoc throughout New Eden, and the Society of Conscious Thought is actually going to build a keep star in Postuvin in order to try and fight this outbreak. So I think that that's pretty interesting. At some point I will have to go and take a look in Postuvin to see if we have that keep star in build or something like that. It would be pretty cool to watch. Anyways, we are of course here for the market, so I guess that's all I had for news. Let's quickly dive into that, and that's gonna be at 1 minute. As always, we'll start with plex. There we go. Oh, and that's unfortunate. I had noticed it, but I took the gamble. There were a couple more plex that were selling below the current price of 1,000,084. So we can see here in the last few days that the median daily price is jumping up just a little bit, and it's up to 1,084,000,000. But just maybe 5 minutes ago, there were a couple for sale at 1,067,000, which is what you're seeing on the ticker. And then a few at 1,074,000 as well, which was the average price in like the last 2 weeks or something like that. But it was really not that many of them, maybe 5 or 6, something like that. And after that, it did take this big jump up to 1,084,000,000, so 10 million more than the last few weeks or something like that. And the bars are at 1,037,000, which is pretty much in line with what we had last week as well. So it looks to me like there's a bit more demand, and that prices are driven up just a little bit, but it's definitely still not anything that's completely out of the ordinary either. If people see that they can get more than 1,084,000, maybe we'll get a little bit more selling coming in as well, and it could all just be part of this meandering, this pretty much sideways movement for plex that we've been in since about halfway January. Quick look at what's happening in the perimeter. So we have several markets, but yeah, not that many of them here. You can also see that the volume's 510, but then down here we get 111. So a lot of these are not that big, and they're actually not that undercutting Cheetah by that much. They are selling for 1,066,000,000. This could mean two things. Maybe fewer people are selling in perimeter, or a lot of the increased demand is first being absorbed by perimeter. This would basically mean that perimeter could become a little bit of a barometer, a predictor for what's going to happen in Cheetah itself. So that's pretty interesting. On the buyer side of things, they go up to 1,047,000,000 in the perimeter trade hub. That's pretty interesting. So not as big a margin between Cheetah and perimeter on the sellers, and 10 million extra on the buyer side as well. Very small margin in perimeter basically. Next up we have the multiple pilot training certificates. Very interesting here. Big volume spike just a couple of days ago. Let's see if the same thing happened for plex. No. Big volume spike right here. We do see that same pattern, although it starts a little bit later, but throughout February we were basically pretty much sideways, and these guys are, well, if you're interested in perimeter, it's just 3 of them in fact in perimeter and 1 in New Caldari. So it's really only the plex market that is active in most of perimeter at a sizable quantity. The rest is still happening here in Cheetah 4.4, and these multiple pilot training certificates are selling for 1,090,000. But again, this was also what I was seeing when I was making the ticker. 5 more buys and we're at 1,165,000,000 all of a sudden, which is quite a sizable jump, and bars are going up above 1,000,000,000 as well. So it could be that increased demand is here, and this is a little bit worrying that just 5 more purchases would bump up the seller price by that much, by 80 million all of a sudden. So this could be another indication that there is strong demand. The question is, will supply be able to plug that gap, or are we at the start of an increased price for plex and the training certificates? Next up we have the body resculpt certificate. That one still at probably a little bit above average, but also not moving in any clear direction right now. There's just not a lot of them, so they're selling for 300 million. Bars are at 275 million. Volumes here, you can see that we have a day where just one gets sold. On average, I would put this at maybe 5 or something like that. So this is really not the market where you're gonna make a lot of money, but I do like to keep one eye on this one, because if CCP were to ever come out with something that has to do with walking in stations, that has to do with the full body avatars, this may spark a lot of interest in the body resculpt certificate. Next up we have the skill extractors, of course, a chart that very closely mirrors plex, because you have to basically grab plex, create Aurum, and then get skill extractors. Very noticeable pattern here is the increased volume since the Ascension expansion. You can clearly see that we've gone up from maybe a little bit less than 5,000 a day to around 5 to 6,000, or clearly above 5,000 a day is what you could say. You know, you could put the averages here to right above 5,000, and prices though, yeah, very close to the plex market. 250 million for the sellers, 241 million for the buyers. Not that big of a margin between these either. It looks pretty stable so far. Supply, does that look pretty healthy? Actually, less than a full front page. It's been a long time since we've seen that. I'm not seeing that big of supply as what we normally see in skill extractors. I do see decent numbers though. 74, 20, 30, 40 here, another 39, another 47 coming in. So it's still being sold in pretty big batches, but I'm not seeing a massive amount of sell orders just yet. So yeah, be careful a little bit. I'm seeing pretty good demand and not that much supply in all of this plex related stuff so far. Skill injectors, at some point of course the increase in price does have to stop. Highest medium daily price at around 680 million, so we had to give a little bit of ground back towards 650. Let's see what we're selling at. 675, so we're gonna bounce up a little bit more, and the buyers are at 635 million. Fresh supply of this, look at that, that's 2 full front pages compared to the skill extractors, but the volumes are markedly lower when it comes to individual batches. 13, 22, 10, so people around 33 here is respectable, but a lot of them less than 10. It is not such a clear picture, but we do see that a lot of people are trying to sell some skill extractors at the current price ranges. In the last 24 hours we are going from, let's take a quick look at that, 687 million down to 675 million. There's obviously quite a bit of competition, people that are still making good money on these skill injectors, but I don't think that they're basically dumping their entire stocks at this point. They're taking some profits, but a lot of people have probably got much bigger stocks than what we're seeing right now. Still pretty interesting to see that these skill injectors are going for a pretty decent price, I think, at the moment, especially in the last month or so compared to what plexes have been doing. This is a nice chart for investors in these skill injectors, and probably a good thing for people that have some of these skill point farms that create these skill injectors as a business. I'm not exactly sure where the balance would lie at the moment, but it could be good news for them. SP basically is going at a nice premium. After the plex stuff, let's take a look at some minerals. That's going to be at 910. There we go. And as always, we'll start with titanium. You can see it's trying to stop its descent here. I think we're trying to form a bottom at the current price range. Sellers though are still competing below 4 ISK. So when I was making the ticker, there was one seller at 389, and in these last few minutes, you can see that right here, in the last 10 minutes we do have 388, 387 coming in well 250 million unit batches. It's not that bad, but it's going to take some time for this market to recover, especially of course because the Rorcal nerf is not to be expected until March. So at the moment the faucets are still wide open, and I think we're still seeing that effect. but people are starting to take position with buy orders of 2 billion units, 1.6 billion units right here at 368. That should stop titanium from crashing any further. I think we are close to the bottom, and I'm slowly buying some stocks of that as well, although I am looking to diversify at this point. I feel like I have a decent amount already. Next up here we've got pyrite. That one is clearly jumping off from its low point. We actually managed to get up to 6 ISK on average. Sellers are at 633, buyers are at 612, having to follow suit. That is quite interesting. And this is clearly a bit of a departure from the sharp downward trend. So you should probably have looked into buying last week when the Rorcal nerf was announced, and you could have easily picked up pyrite for less than 6 ISK now. It's already going for 633. The real question, of course, is going to be what will the actual impact be of this Rorcal nerf, and will we see a comeback in all of these high-SiC minerals or not? After this we have Mixalon, the one high-SiC mineral that was doing decently well. It was giving back ground heading towards 70 ISK, but as you can see here in the last week, so in the last 6-7 days here, a bit of a bump back up and then a bit of correction back down as well towards 68. Sellers are at 70 and the buyers are at 68.80, so very narrow margin. Basically Mixalon is hesitating here, but it is planning to stay around 70 ISK. That seems to be a pretty strong price point that is being defended by the market at the moment, at least by the seller part of things, because the buyers would like to see us go below that. With pyrite swinging up, with titanium trying to form a bottom, I think there is a decent chance that we will stick to this 70 ISK here. Next up we have Isogen, very similar chart to the pyrite chart here. So a 1 year low point at a pretty big volume spike here, so a bit of final dumping happening, and then a bit of a jump up, just not that much just yet. Sellers are at 46.90. Buyers are at 46.10. The gap is definitely closing between buyers and sellers. So the question is, what is the impact going to be when the Rorcal nerf hits? I think that could be an interesting time. Next up we have Noxium. Again, you can see here some big volumes coming in, driving the price down. So these must be sell order volumes, driving the price down towards 290, extremely low price for Noxium. Then we had a bit of a jump back up to 325, probably some position taking happening in those last 4 or 5 days, and currently Noxium is selling for 314 ISK. Buyers are up to 299. So yeah, there is definitely some investing that is being done in this mineral market, which is good for people that either have some stocks or are actively mining here. There is hope on the horizon. Maybe we're finally seeing light at the end of the downward tunnel in all of these high-SiC minerals here. Look at the Isogen chart. That's just depressing, from 100 down to 45 ISK on a 1 year basis pretty much. When it comes to nullsec, let's take a look at Zydrine. I actually bought a little bit on this bottom here, so that's good for me to see a bit of a jump up. It's just not that large just yet. Sellers at 9.49, buyers are at 9.15. I still think that you can pick up some cheap Zydrine at this point. And finally we also have Megasite here that also jumps back up. So Megasite, very similar to Mixalon, was managing to hold on well since January, had to give back ground a little bit towards 1365, but it is already jumping back up towards 1500. 1480 ISK for the sellers, 1409 ISK for the buyers for Megasite. So here this is still the strongest nullsec mineral, probably a bit of a bottleneck, just like Mixalon, which is the main reason why a lot of people are seeing this pattern. We have Mixalon and Megasite doing strong, probably the bottlenecks when it comes to just mining stuff in general, which means that they're overproducing the rest, and thus there are these big stocks of titanium that are being made that just don't have the Mixalon counterparts to create most of the stuff that industrialists want to create, and as a result, of course, all of that is being dumped to the market, and it is crashing the price to 1 year lows. But it also means that the bottlenecks have managed to stay pretty damn strong. But one little caveat on that: Megasite did go pretty damn low towards 1000 ISK in November, December at the Ascension expansion. So it clearly shows much more volatility than Mexelon did, although that one did also crash down to 55 ISK here, but recovered much more quickly. Was managing to stay at 70 throughout the Ascension expansion. Just one general dump when everything else was crashing, but recovered quite nicely, just like Megasite did, just with a deeper bottom and a bit more volatility. Next up here, or finally, we also have Morphite. Let's take a look at that one. We also have this volume spike at a bit of a bottom at 1900 average on the chart here. Are we recovering a little bit? Sellers are at above 10,000 ISK, buyers are still at 9,100, so I still think that you could gamble on some cheap buy orders, but Morphite is tied to tick 2, which I think you'll want a major war to see this one move up. But that's a general thing. In fact, if we do see a major war spark up, which sometime, I mean, World War B was in April last year, so it could still happen. We see a lot of losses. That could be a really good time to do so. If on top of that the Rorqual gets nerfed and that has an impact, we could get this nice upswing, but we do need the stars to align basically for the mineral market to recover, where our investments would make some real risk. Still, you know, if you have some time, then it could happen. First we'll see what the Rorqual nerf does, then we'll see if a big war could take off in EVE Online. Next up we have PI 1645. Let's go over these. But a lot of them were doing really well last week. So here, for instance, we have construction blocks. In the last week, it had to give back ground a little bit from 13,600 ISK pretty much down towards 13,000. But 13,000 is still a pretty respectable price, I would say, slightly above average. So the sellers are going to be a bit above that, 13,200. Buyers are at 12,000. I would say selling on the sell orders is still getting you a bit above average. The buyers though are probably on the average buy price with 12,000 ISK. It's a decently wide margin between buyers and sellers, but sellers are still winning out a little bit. They can dictate the price slightly, and thus they have a bit of a premium. Consumer electronics, taking off. That's quite interesting. So we're a bit late for an actual investment. Bottoms would be close to 10,000, 11,000 ISK, something like that. But here in the last few days, we can clearly see that the daily average prices are spiking up towards 14,000 ISK. Sellers 14,200, buyers 12,000 ISK. Definitely a bit too high, but very wide margin. So here again, we can see that it's the sellers that are dictating the price. There is much more demand than there is actual supply, and as a result, the sell prices are going quite well, doing quite well, and are definitely above average. Next up here we've got coolants that is staying at close to 1 year high. Pretty good price here, 15,000 ISK for the coolants. 15,900 for the sellers, 15,000 for the buyers. Even selling straight to the buy orders here is getting you a well above average price. Of course, it's usually alright to have a little bit of patience and to compete with these sell orders. But again, coolants, really strong performance at the moment, a great price, and this for something that you can just make off of gas planets that are very, very common in New Eden. So yeah, maybe the Ascension expansion with the alpha clones that cannot create PI have created more demand in general, and as a result we are seeing these better prices for PI for people that are already doing so. This to me is a little bit of should I get my other characters into PI? Should I maybe invest in like a multiple training certificate or maybe some skill injectors to try and get them to run 5 planets as well? I mean, in general here, construction blocks above average, consumer electronics taking off, which was one of the few ones that was not doing too well. Coolants, very easy to set up. Very common as well, and at 1 year high prices, definitely above average. I mean, 10,000 ISK, 11,000 ISK is probably an average in the first half of the year, so this is a nice little premium. It becomes quite enticing to look into that. Here again, enriched uranium, of course, when you spike up to a median daily price that goes above 17,500, you have to give back a little bit of ground, but still 15,000 looks like a pretty decent price as well. 15,900, almost 16,000 for the sellers, 15,000 for the buyers here as well. Again, really strong price for enriched uranium. Mechanical parts also at a 1-year high here, seemingly not stopping. 15,000 again. One seller coming in, but if we disregard this one, we're talking 15,450 for the sellers and 14,500 for the buyers. This being made on barren planets with pretty damn common base materials is also a really good price here. Clearly a 1-year high again. Next up, we've got oxygen. That is a bit different, but it is tied to fuels, which could be important because it's going to be the extra product today. Fuels, as you can see from the ticker, nitrogen fuel jumped up to almost 13,000 ISK. And this the second week in a row with a pretty sizable percentage. So oxygen is tied to that, and it's not really doing anything out of the ordinary. It's probably selling a little bit above average at around 500 ISK, but it's not like we're seeing this sharply increase or at a 1-year high like with mechanical parts, which, well, to be fair, mechanical parts is tied to fuels, as is coolants, so this could play a part, of course, in a general increase in price in fuels, but oxygen doesn't seem to be part of that equation. Here are robotics taking off. Ooh, really good, again to a 1-year high. 120,000 ISK, yeah, 126,000 ISK for the sellers, 115,000 for the buyers. Definitely following up here. You can see the fresh buy orders, full front page of them, trying to pick up those robotics, competing with each other. So there is strong demand and probably just not enough supply at the moment. Again, a 1-year high. Really strong week for most of the PI. Here is the rocket fuels that were actually also working on a 1-year high last week. These guys have to give back ground, but they have also been doing really well in the last month or so. So it's not surprising to see us drop back a little bit in rocket fuels. Still 14,182 for the sellers, 12,600 for the buyers. Buyers coming back towards a more regular price band, but sellers still trying to get that nice premium, and I think basically not succeeding all that well in the last week, but the fact that they're still holding onto a 14,000 price range for the sellers is a bit of an indication that that if supply doesn't continue to go straight to the buyers, which at this point it won't because of the wide margin, then we'll probably bounce back up a little bit, and they're not giving up on higher prices just yet. Self-harmonizing power cores, very strongly tied to structures, so this is a bit different. You can see that downtrend since the Ascension expansion. Currently selling for 2,146 million. Buyers though 1.9 million, well below 2 million, widening that gap. Supply, you can see that in the last 24 hours, more than a full front page, continuing to put up that pressure on the seller side of things. Unlike most of the fuel related PI stuff, the structure related PI stuff is oversupplied. The demand is not as strong there, and thus we have this decrease in price for those. Superconductors, I think, is tied because of this spike and this spike, that it is tied to structures mostly, but this one is still doing alright. Also average price of around 15,000 ISK. Selling for 15,200, buyers are at 13,950. Not as good as the 1-year highs related to fuels directly, but still for a refined PI material, something that you can definitely make on a single planet. I think it's storm planets for superconductors. This is a really good price, especially if you disregard two spikes, and if you look at where we were about a year ago, 12,000 seemed to be an average price, which is also like a good price for coolants, 12k. So I'm definitely seeing that for some reason refined PI materials are doing really well at the moment, even those not necessarily tied to fuels. Test cultures is the one that I was keeping an eye on, but it's going for 9,000 ISK. Definitely not that great, probably a little bit below average, but it's not at its bottom either. So I'm 6,000, 7,000 for buyers. Nope, still 8,750, sellers at almost 10,000 ISK. I would say that, yeah, test cultures not doing that great, but They are definitely not at the bottom where I would say, yeah, start investing in that. You know, we're not at that point yet either. And finally, with wetware mainframes that are clearly going down as well. 5-day moving average staying well below the 20-day moving average. Volumes are going down as well. Are we selling for less than 2.5 million? Buyers 2.3 million. But here again, we can see that the supply, almost a full front page of new sellers. Buyers are just not there. If you're looking to invest into this PI material, I would look at structure related stuff, but timing is going to be very important on this because you don't want to buy too early either. Self-harmonizing power cores, buying for less than 2 million. I think this starts to be pretty interesting. Wetware mainframes have throughout the 2 launches of structures been basically the bottleneck a little bit, so these did have pretty sharp upswings to 4.2 million and here to almost 3 million, but it's taking more time for wetware mainframes to actually recover, and so you were still buying well above 2 million. I would personally like to see the buyers closer to 2 million, so that at least buying these comes in line, you know, with the power cores, which is advanced PI material. This is also an advanced PI material. So this premium, I mean, it is the bottleneck, so it could be the right gamble, but at the moment my preference would be going for buying self-harmonizing power cores well below 2 million. And if you look at this spike here, up to 3.8 million, and here we are talking 3 million as well. So at the moment, I'd be looking at the power cores and keeping a close eye on wetware mainframes. I would like to see this go even lower. I do think if we look at the final week or so, final 10 days, that it could happen because supply is much stronger than demand at the moment. And if this keeps up, then we could see much lower prices all of a sudden. So interesting situation in the PI market here. Next up, we have some Tech 1 chips, 2650. So someone asks, how do I select these? I generally just select these pretty randomly. I was planning to switch these out more often than I do, but I do feel like trying to stay in touch with these Tech 1 chips over a longer period of time can be pretty good because they in the end are more of a barometer for the mineral market, industrial output, general activity in the game, and constantly switching Tech 1 chips I don't think is the best for EVE Talk either. It's also because I'm a bit lazy. I would have to make a selection of another 11-12 Tech 1 chips and then switch out the quick bar and all of that stuff. It's a bit of work, but from time to time I will switch these out. If you have interesting ones that maybe you notice a pattern that is completely different from what we're seeing in general. I'm mostly looking at the general pattern when it comes to Tech 1 chips, but feel free to post suggestions in the comments. I might definitely switch a couple of them in and out if it looks like they could tell an interesting story. The Apocalypse, though, as we can see here, a battleship. This is clearly the mineral price pattern that is showing through here with the cutoff point at around the Ascension expansion, where we all of a sudden are going to much lower prices. 152 million. Another thing is probably the lack of demand here. You can see that we have some buy orders at 146 million, but the highest price was asked like 6 days ago. This does mean that the Tech 1 market is not very, at least the Tech 1 battleship market is not very active at the moment. We have very low volumes, low prices due to the minerals, but it's also going to be very tricky to actually make a lot of money creating apocalypses because the demand just isn't there in general. The activity isn't there in general. Arbitrator next, also slowly going down. The unusual pattern here is of course this jump up in October up to 11 million all of a sudden, but since then, since the Ascension expansion, we've basically slowly been going down and now at 7.7 million compared to average price here of probably above 8.6 million. We are also below average on this cruiser. Again, we can see the lack of demand here. Just 6 of them being bought in the last 24 hours. Then the rest of that, 7.3 million for 200, is basically one of those no-brain investments almost. Sellers are at 8 million, and again, pretty low volumes is the story here. So I would say that this tells us that alpha clones are not really rushing towards cruisers just yet. Next up here we've got the bellicose. Ooh, that's interesting. All of a sudden we've got this major, which is standard Minotaur cruiser. We've got this big volume spike of 262 being sold or bought all of a sudden. We do see that the price go down, so I do think that there's going to be a bit of supply. No, 7.5 million for the sellers. That's just one that's being brought in here. 8.5 million, which on the chart would be around here. Okay, really weird volume spike here. Not sure exactly what's happening, but other than that here, this is so weird to me. You get sellers, definitely not that many of them. Buyers, not that many of them either. But you do have this huge volume spike here. I wonder if this may be a bit of an anomaly or a mistake or something like that. Because you would think that this would actually be in line with like 10, 12 of them being sold every day. And then this decrease in price makes sense. It's weird. Okay, bellicose, we'll have to take another look at that one next week to see if this volume spike is maybe not a mistake or something like that. Next up here we've got the breacher. Despite this volume spike here, again, the price is not moving. This does mean that these smaller ships are probably pretty inelastic at the moment. There's just so many of them. You can see here on the breacher seller side of things, you've got big volumes of 100, 358, 359, 129, 207. That's a lot of them that are keeping this price really stable. Even if someone decides to buy 100 or 200 breachers all of a sudden, even apparently 1400 breachers is not going to move the price that much, because this gap is plugged right away. If you want to, you can make breachers at a very fast pace, bring those to the market. The big part of this story is that when it comes to these frigates, the margin is much smaller. 450,000 for the sellers, 405,000 for the buyers, and you do have 200 in demand, 240 in demand. You have these volume spikes. So from time to time, people do move in with probably alpha clone fleets for their roams, things like that. It does tend to happen, but it's of course so small, so easy to make that it hardly reflects in the price. And so again, we have this pattern, slight jump up here in December, probably on alpha clone activity with all the newness. But since then, industrialists have basically been able to move there and have grabbed all the margins, basically pressured all the margins out of this market as well, because before this you could put the average price at above 500,000 ISK. Now we're definitely below that. Again, the mineral market showing through in this Tech 1 market. It's basically brutal because it's pretty easy to create stuff in the Tech 1 market. The GTAT Trade Hub is probably not your best bet if you want to get in on industry. Tech 1 ships also pretty tricky to make a lot of money on that. You basically need to, just like in real life, find the gap in the market, and it's not going to be in the trade hubs. It's going to be local markets that for some reason have higher demand of certain goods and not as much production. That is where you want to focus on. So I'm in detail. If I'm looking to make stuff and make a profit on stuff, I'm definitely not looking to bring that back, all that stuff back to Jita and sell it. I'm looking to find things that are in high demand around the Dital system, probably in Providence. So for me it would be probably a lot of mining equipment, although with the Rorcal changes that may not be that good, and Amar related stuff is probably pretty good there, for instance. So here for the Brutix, again selling for 49.4 million, bars are at 45 million, a battle cruiser. So here the Ascension mineral price crash is a bit more pronounced in the prices right here. Next up, we've got the catalysts, volume spike here, probably burn Jita related, then going down all of a sudden, but we're still below 1 million. So here again, yeah, big volume spike, 2,300 catalysts in a day. What is the response? We go up from 970,000 to maybe a bit above a million. A million too, and then a couple of days later, 1 week later, we're right back where we left off. 990,000 is for the sellers, 910 for the buyers, 1,452 coming in here is of course going to stop this price from going back up, and that is the Tech 1 market basically. It's really easy, especially on the smaller ships, for the industrialists that already have the perfect blueprints to fill any gap, to take advantage of any opportunity. It's a cutthroat market with very small margins, especially here in the trade hubs. Cormorants next, also a bit of a jump up on a volume spike up to 1.3, 1.4 million, already selling back for 1.2 million, 1.1 for the buyers. If we go over here, it's still up a little bit from the bottom, which was at around 1 million, but you can see that the gap is being plugged here in the last 24 hours, almost a full front page, 122 here, 170 here, 150 here, just competing with each other, trying to eke out all the little bit of profit that they can from these higher cormorant prices. We'll be back to 1.1 million on the sellers by next week, and close to 1 million probably on the buyer side. That's my expectation here. Crucifier next, just one more week I think, and I will have this anomalous data point out of here, so that we'll have a more visually pleasing chart here. But again here, pretty low price point, 190,000 ISK, clearly also under pressure since the Ascension expansion. 199,000 for the sellers, 171 for the buyers, and the lack of demand here is once again showing up. Next up we've got the Drake, cratering to a 1 point low, average price yesterday, or is that today, of 41.6 million. That's really low. 44 million for the sellers, 40.5 million for the buyers. That means that people are actually sometimes just dumping a couple of Drakes to those buyers. They say, I don't care, as long as it's 40 million, I'll take it, because yeah, the Drake is not that popular at the moment. Next up, the Retriever, also a 1 year low, trying to form a bottom at 18.6 million, 18.9 for the sellers, 17.2 for the buyers. That is of course really a low price. I think basically the Retriever is hit by both the crashed mineral market and the changes to ship mining, where, well, you want to get into a Rorcal or an Orca, to be honest, compared to a Retriever. I don't think that even if you fit a Retriever with no tank fully for yield, I still don't think you're gonna beat an Orca. And finally here we also have a Tempest, which is again a battleship, shows a bit of a hesitation pattern here, but again, Ascension expansion, we could start at almost 190 million. Currently we're going down to 140 million. That's pretty crazy. No demand here. 137 million for the sellers. Daily volumes, I'm actually almost interested in putting up a buy order for this stuff. 5, 6 of them, so I would maybe risk a buy order of 2, 3 Tempests at a time. Try to pick them up, let's say for 122, 121, extremely low price. Tempests have been used in Nullsec fleets, so they are part of Nullsec doctrines. So I would not be surprised that at some point a big buy would happen on all of these sell orders, cannibalizing everything, maybe up to the 144 million or something like that. But they'll want big enough volumes to make that worth it. So right now I would almost be tempted to invest in a couple of Tempests to try and sell if a big buyout happens all of a sudden. So yeah, Tick 1 market pretty low because of the extremely low mineral prices, and apparently also not that much demand in general. Next up we've got Tick 2, 3815. We can do that. The Tick 2 market, I'm checking the smaller ships. The reason for that is that these seem to be the ones that still have a bit of volatility worth trading in. Once you're going towards Tick 2 battleships, cruisers, things like that, it's basically such small volumes and such a difficult market because of the taxes, I believe, that these are so stable that it's just not even worth it to go and look for them anymore. The one exception at some point could become logistics cruisers. Those are still flown in pretty big numbers and sometimes lost in big Nullsec fleet engagements, but yeah, it's in the interceptors, the stealth bomber, things like that, where the meta is at the moment, and thus here we do see a little bit of volatility and opportunities to buy at low points here for the Ares, for instance, close to 20 million, sell at higher points, 25 or even more than that if we are lucky. So Ares selling for 21.7 million, buying for 20 million. I would say you could risk buy orders close to 20 million. Competing with that, don't go too high. but we can see here from the massive volume on the sell orders that, yeah, the Ares is working on a bottom. You know, lose a couple of interceptor fleets in nullsec, have to replace those, you'll see some Ares buying happen. Next up here, we got the claw again. You can see that pattern of some of those spikes here working on a pretty low price towards 20 million as well. We've been lower than that, 18.34 million. Buyers are at 18 million though, so if you would be looking to place a couple of buy orders, look at this: 103, 532, 61, 252, no demand. If you're looking to pick up a few cheap Tech 2 ships with a chance at making a profit, if something kicks up in nullsec, I would look at the claw, because this is a great opportunity. Next up here, we've got the crow. That one is actually taking off a little bit, heading towards 26 million, yeah, selling for 26.7 million. Buyers are at 23.6 million. You know, it's also an interceptor. Of course, it's missiles, which is very popular. I think it has better slots as well, or maybe a better power grid or something like that. I watched Imperium News stream with an interceptor fleet with a boat, and I think he was flying a crow that could actually field probe launcher, expanded probe launcher to probe down enemy ships. So it could be why this one is popular, but you can also see that we do have bottoms close to 20 million here, if I can take the right point. Yeah, look at that, 21.6 million here, we're talking 21 million. So, you know, the buyers are definitely paying 2.5 million more than the bottom prices. Sellers selling at really good prices, at a really good price, almost 27 million. This compared to the claw. Yeah, crow is good to sell if you manage to make a good investment on that one, like something that you can do now in the claw market itself. Man, I need to get here and at least try with a couple of them. The Ares here also working on a 1-year low. This is a destroyer, it's a bit bigger, so selling for 37.7 million, buying for 35.4 million. 35.4 on the entire 1-year chart, definitely at a 1-year low point. You can again here see decent supplies, 32, 34, 29, but be careful, I'm only seeing 2 fresh sell orders, so this could turn around at any time. The last few weeks would have been a great time to try and pick up a couple of cheap Areses around 35, 36 million. Flycatcher next, up in price a little bit on a big volume spike, going from 53 million almost up to, what is this? Yeah, 59 million, not that bad. Currently selling for 60 million, 54 million on the buyer side of things. Here again, showing this slight opportunity, this volatility that does show up in the smaller Tech 2 ships. Heretic next, look at that, this is great. This is really awesome. I think couple of weeks ago, Heretic 45 million, definitely buy orders below that. Now selling for 54 million. Buyers are still at 45 million, so this is definitely pretty wide margin that is being made here. But if you would have bought after this downtrend here, you can now try and sell them for 54 million, make a bit of a profit on that. Very interesting, the Heretic market here, constantly going between 45 million and almost 60 million. Looks pretty interesting for investments. Next up here, we've got the Hound. After the double spike here, this is a stealth bomber of towards 30 million. Currently settling at the current price range, and unfortunately it's settling a little bit above the previous bottom. So you could look for 18 million, but 42 at 19 million is going to keep the price a little bit more stable. So here you have to take the gamble. You have to decide, do I think that this increased supply here, 131, 72, 92, is going to eventually push people to sell to those 19 million 42 units here, and then maybe even push through this 18.5 million so that I can pick up some hounds at 18.3, 18.4, or do I think that volatility is going to happen before that happens, that sellers are maybe going to stop producing hounds and bring those to the market, switching to maybe another stealth bomber, maybe something like the Crow, things like that. And is buying at 19 million actually the right move? That is of course always the question that we're looking for, and this is why I cover these smaller ships here. For the Hound personally, unless we see other stealth bombers taking off right now, I would hold on. So next up here we got the Malediction. This is another interceptor that is taking off though. That is interesting, up to 29 million. 21.2 million after 2 legs down, so this was the buy opportunity, probably close to 21 million. Now selling for 28 million, buyers are at 23 million, so just like the Crow, the Malediction is up quite a bit as well. Manticore, that's a stealth bomber here, 24.4 million, a bit above average, but buyers are at 22.5 million. This is also a pretty mature market, decently low, not as low as what we can see the Manticore, but basically in the same situation as the Hound. You can see here that we have had lower bottoms. When the average prices are at 21 million, you know that there are buy orders a little bit below that were possible. Here is the Nemesis next. Unfortunately, it's showing the same pattern here, settling at a price range above 22 million. Sellers are 22.9, buyers are 21.5, which, I mean, I know that you can pick up Nemesis below 20 million. Right here, average price 18.5 million. Here we've got average price 19.4 million. So this again, for me, it's too early, and it's not like the Nemesis is all of a sudden taking off and that all production is going to switch there. Nope, for some reason stealth bombers are just not reaching their previous bottoms, are selling at a bit of a premium. Here we got the Purifier taking off a little bit towards 22.3 million. Yeah, 23 million. Right here, lack of supply is pretty obvious here, but still 20.3 million for the Purifiers again. I think you can buy those well below that if you look at the entire chart. So the stealth bombers, it's a little bit weird. I would basically still hold on, but that may be the mistake to make. If something does happen in null secure, all of a sudden you're going to see stealth bomber fleets lost. They will need to be replaced. So yeah, that's basically the gamble. I think the philosophy that I have when it comes to the Tech 2 market. Try and spot the right buy opportunities. Look at the historical bottoms, but it's always difficult to say if they're actually going to push back down towards that. And finally here we've got the Saber, pretty interesting one as well. Just probably a week ago you could have bought these for 52 million without any trouble. Currently selling for 68 million, 64.6 million for the sellers. So obviously supply is coming in to take advantage of that already. 59 million for the buyers. But here again, showing a bit of volatility. This week it seems to be like some of the interdictors are doing really well. And that claw is looking just really juicy to at least take a small gamble on. Very cool stuff, I think, in the Tech 2 market, showing that at least the smaller ships have some volatility, have some opportunity for some active trading. Next up, Tech 3, 4720. This is a different picture, of course. Most of these are starting to show a little bit of a price variation after battling bottom prices, some serious dumping that was happening in the last few weeks, basically since February. So here the name of the game is in general oversupply. You can see this from this 240, 200, 154, 120, now going for 28 million. I actually bought a couple at 29 million. I think I'm going to make the investment again, buy a couple at 28 million here. But yeah, bottom prices for Confessor, hugely oversupplied market. If at some point this stops, then this is your time to make some investments in this. Hecate next, selling for 34 million, but again, look at that, 128, 141, 14, 55. It's just a hugely oversupplied market, and so here Hecate recovering a little bit in price, but it's definitely not that great either. The volumes on the seller side are just massive compared to the buyers that want to buy 1, 2, 6, 10 maybe. Hesitantly, I think this one, yeah, 29.5 million. He wants to buy 10 for less than 30 million, which is probably a pretty damn good price. The Jackdaw also, 1 year low. Looking at seller volume, this is just depressing. 227, 300, pushing the price down to 28.6 million. Again, lower than what I bought a couple Jackdaws at 29 million. So I think I'm gonna buy a couple extra, to be honest. And then finally here we've got this Vapor going for 28.1 million, 446, 137. This is just, crazy oversupply, 1 year low prices. If you're looking for some cheap tactical destroyers, this is the time to buy them. And then in the cruiser market, what's happening here? Also 1 year low for the Legion, basically a line straight down since September, down to currently selling for 126 million. Bars are at 120 million. Very cheap Tech 3 ships at the moment. The volumes here are not that bad, right? Last 24 hours, just 5 of them. Here you get 14, 22, 40, but that's a bit older. You also have 22 of them being bought at 120. So here the volumes are not that bad. I think that this could be absorbed and on the way up with just a bit of extra demand, but for the destroyers it's definitely a lot worse. Here we've got the Loki. Man, buyers 112 million, very cheap Lokis, working on its 1 year low once again. 123 million for the sellers, but this again 2,821 here. It's not that bad when it comes to the cruiser volumes. Proteus next, again very clearly at a 1 year low. 119 million for the sellers, 124 for the buyers. So yeah, there's not much to say. I think that this could be under pressure a little bit just because of what's happening in the destroyer market. Here is the Tengu, the first one that tries to crawl out of the bottom. Currently selling for 133 million. Buyers though still at 123. I bought 1 or 2 Tengus at less than 120 million right here. So this is taking off a little bit, but I still think that at the moment for the Tech 3 markets, you're probably looking at buy opportunities, not sell opportunities. And I'm seeing one in the Loki right here. I mean, if you can pick up a Loki for 115 million, which on the 1 year chart could have gone for 160 million in October, I think that it makes sense to try and pick that up. So I'm going to look for, if I want more of these destroyers, I'll just pick them up straight from the sellers here at 28 million, and probably risk a gamble on the Loki as well on this one. So the Tech 3 market oversupplied like crazy, especially in the destroyers. Look for buy opportunities. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't go and spend all your cash on these destroyers or anything like that. Instead, what I would do is invest slowly, and probably also try to prioritize ships that you can actually fly, that you'd be willing to fly, just in case that of this not working out. Who knows? And finally, for the extra material at 52 minutes, we are going to take a look at fuels, because nitrogen fuel blocks is in the ticker. You can see double jump up, average price just a couple of days, 29,000 ISK, which is quite high, well above the average. This is a complete breakout of at least the nitrogen fuel blocks. I'm interested to see what the rest are doing. So here, this has been basically a complete buyout. All of this is in the last 24 hours. Buyers are at 24.5. 24,500 as well. Demand is pretty strong, basically had to work its way up there, but it's basically been a complete buyout and a relisting possibly. So the question is, what are the others doing? Helium fuel blocks also taking off quite sharply, 25 million on average. Sellers, well, we're empty. So are the volumes there? I'm not specifically seeing big volume spikes on this. This is quite interesting. Here is hydrogen fuel blocks going up to 26 million as well. 20 million, just the lack of supply is right here. All of this is coming in the last 24 hours. And then finally we have oxygen fuel blocks, very similar chart as well. So this is quite interesting, and I couldn't exactly tell you what's behind all of this. Man, someone is selling 488,000 units of oxygen fuel blocks at 26,000 ISK here. So I couldn't tell you exactly what's behind this, but the fact that we're basically empty of fuel blocks on some of these markets is quite worrying. I couldn't tell you if this is speculation, someone that is saying, you know what, I'm gonna put all my ISK in the fuel block market, I'm gonna force it to a higher price range, try to get some profit out of that. It is of course something that is being used up constantly. There is this constant demand. We've also seen that some PI related to fuel blocks are at 1 year highs, you know, coolants, enriched uraniums, robotics, I think are also part of that. So it is quite interesting, this, I don't have an exact explanation. I don't think it can only be the PI. So maybe what could be good is if I try to find the blueprints and take a quick look at that. Yep, this for instance, and then take a look at some of these here. So enriched uranium, oxygen, 500 was okay. Mechanical parts was pretty high as well. Coolants and robotics as well. So PI is definitely up. We know that heavy water is up as well. This is used in the course for the Rorgals, so that could be a part of it. Could also be another big speculative move here. Let's take a look at liquid ozone next. That one is actually at a 1-year low, so this one is not driving up the price. What is strontium doing? 7,500 is probably a really good price for that, but it hasn't moved in the last few months, so nope. And then finally we have nitrogen isotopes in this case. Isotopes, well, after a 1-year low price point here, it's basically recovered in the last few months. That is quite interesting. I'll maybe look at isotopes in general. So nitrogen isotopes recovered. Helium isotopes also recovered from their 1-year lows, came back a little bit. Hydrogen next. That one is still not doing all that well. And then oxygen isotopes are also back where they were basically a year ago. So this is interesting. It looks like fuel blocks are much higher, and it could be explained by the heavy water and then the PI stuff. But I think that the heavy water is a lot of speculation as well, and this could just be more speculation to drive up the fuel block prices to make some profits on these. So yeah, very, very strange situation in the fuel block market. We'll definitely have to keep an eye on this. I'm curious to see if this could make production of fuel blocks interesting, and I think at next week I will look into getting some ice mining drones to my Orca, maybe trying to start some fuel production. I would have to switch out my PI, or maybe I can get my alts into PI and go that route. So we'll see if these higher prices for the fuel blocks can last. If they do, I think I might look into fuel production at my Citadel in Detail, because just one jump out, there are ice belts. So there you go, guys. That's going to be it for this EVE talk. Thank you very much for watching. And as always, I'll see you next time.